A record amount of people are unable to pay back their debt. Here's why that could trigger the financial crisis, part 2. The amount of people in debt today is at a record high. It's their student debt, mortgages, and even car payments. But it doesn't stop there. The government is heavily in debt, and that has once again hit another record high. What is not understood by almost all investors is that this debt is collateralized and securitized. That means that every piece of debt is actually sold off after being packaged up into a derivative product. Just like in 2008, delinquencies can trigger an event that unravels the financial system. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we are going to talk about debt. We're going to talk about the economy. I have a lot of different issues to get into, and I wanted to begin by taking a look at this. A record number of Americans are 90 days behind on their car payments. More than 7 million Americans are at least 90 days behind on their auto loans. That's according to the Fed. So we got good statistics here showing us that 7 million people are delinquent. And we are looking at these numbers rising further and further. I've been showing you over the last few months how this number has been growing. And that's not a small amount of people. And even though we're looking at the United States, which obviously has a big population, it doesn't matter because we are seeing the numbers getting worse. And why auto loans? Why is this happening when today we have such a prosperous population? We've got incredible economic indicators. Apparently, we're being shown this information all the time. Well, that's higher than the peak in 2010 as the country was still reeling from the devastating financial crisis. Imagine all of those different bailouts that they did, funneling all the money from the taxpayer out to the big institutions, and that didn't help anybody. Wow, how can it be? Well, the number of distressed borrowers suggests that not all Americans have benefited from the strong labor market and warrants continued monitoring and analysis of this sector. That's right, don't fix the actual problem, which is the Fed itself, and they wouldn't do so, obviously, in their own reports, but they want to just monitor it. I don't know what they're talking about here exactly, but it's not going to come up with a solution, that's for sure. See, we have an issue that I brought up in the introduction, and it's that the debt, which may not be necessarily as big as it was in some areas, when you see all of these different new derivative products that have been created over the years, the total of that might be less than where it was, let's say in 2007, 2008, but it doesn't matter because as long as there is delinquencies taking place, the risk becomes greater and greater. And that could be based on time. That could be based on the number of events that occur. It could be simply that these institutions are taking more risk in different ways. Maybe they're not diversifying all that garbage that they have enough. Who knows what could actually trigger it? I'm just showing you that debt is a problem, not because the amount, that doesn't really mean much. You just increase the likelihood as you add more debt on top. That's all. Simply because all that debt is being used as part of these insane derivative products. You have to think about this. Credit cards, your credit card debt, you are paying that MasterCard, that Visa every month, let's say, but you don't understand that your debt is being sold off to another company. You're just making your payments as the consumer, as the person with the debt. You don't know what happens after that, but this is a fact. Transition of auto loans into serious delinquency, that's 90 plus days. So we're going to look at two charts here. The first one being by age of borrower, and I'm not going to break it all down, but just to give you an idea of what has happened over the years, it looks like these numbers have increased since they bottomed out, mostly looks like around 2012, 2013 here, and they have been rising on average throughout this period of time. But what has happened really? way. The markets have been doing very, very well. We've been told that the economy has been better for years and years. Why is this the case? Well, they don't have an answer for you, but we can look at some of the details further in a moment. But this is the origination credit score, everything from the worst all the way up to the top, and we'll see that the worst of the worst, obviously, they have been seeing an increased rate of delinquencies, both in comparison to the other groups, but also on its own in percentage terms. This happens to be a very bad scenario because it's those lower credit scores, it's those more risky forms of debt that will go delinquent, that will have that cascade effect that occurs and pulls the market down. That's what happened with subprime mortgages in 2007 that led to the financial crisis. That $22 trillion national debt number is huge, but here's what it really means. But if you look comparing it to the GDP, you know what? It's not in the danger zone. Well, have no fear, everyone, because according to the debt to GDP, which of course they're not even including unfunded liabilities, which is, some say over 100 trillion, some say it's 200 trillion, some put it at these very high numbers. I don't know where it is. I could tell you right now, when you include Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all these things that go underneath the radar, you start to realize that their numbers are not including the most expensive factors. And that shows us how bad we are actually in. The state at which the nation is in, related to the debt, is far gone. It is mathematically impossible to ever pay back. Student debt is absolutely massive and it grows every single year. Well, right now, a GOP proposal could snatch your student loan payment right from your paycheck. Lawmakers are proposing a massive overhaul to the student debt system. Imagine that for a second as you see this growing number of people accumulating tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and now they're going to force it out of people's accounts. Borrowers' monthly loan bills would be automatically deducted from their paychecks. The plan quickly drew criticism from consumer advocates who called it a mandatory wage garnishment. I don't know where you sit on this issue here, but it's definitely something that's going to take a lot of effort to get through. I'm not sure it's going to pass, of course, because to do so is going to take a really big step. So we'll see what happens with that. But regardless, the situation is that people are so heavily in debt, and student loans happen to be one of those very big issues, that's for sure. So let's move on to the next one. West Coast real estate is now so expensive that married couples are moving in with multiple roommates. The number of married couples living with roommates has doubled since 1995. So real estate has become extremely expensive. We're looking at both rents and mortgages. The house prices have risen. We have seen interest rates rising a small amount over the years. They're still historically very, very low. And yet people have found themselves in considerable amount of debt when it comes to real estate. Look at this. This is from Trulia. The share of married couples with roommates tends to be higher in more expensive markets. That doesn't surprise me, of course. When you look at areas like San Francisco, San Jose, San Diego, New York, of course, makes the list as well. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have places like Detroit and Philadelphia, just to give you an idea. So to me, this shows us that we have gone further and further into debt on many levels. And people have to co-inhabit. And that could mean that they are living in a dormitory style environment, which many cities now have. Basically, you share facilities to make it cheaper, or you take on a roommate, or you're living, in this case, married couples taking on more than one roommate. So this happens to be an issue that is presented particularly in the more expensive cities. And of course, that is quite obvious. However, the numbers are increasing. That's what needs to be pointed out. And I thought this was really interesting. A tiny cottage in Portsmouth, New Hampshire is up for sale with an eye-popping listing price of $2 million. The 0.34 acre, so 1/3 of an acre plot is prime real estate. Well, you can see in the picture, you're getting a little house out of a cartoon apparently, but obviously you're buying the land and that's the whole point. But I just wanted to show you how ridiculous this has become. To pay $2 million for, obviously this house is going to be torn down and they're going to excavate the land, build a bigger house on top of it. It just shows you though what has happened with real estate and the value of money. $2 million is not affordable to most people. And on that topic, America's most unaffordable cities for housing. Look around, they have a whole list, but I just wanted to show you on the map that they give us. Santa Cruz, California is number 1. New York is number 5. And you could see the rest on there if you're interested. I just wanted to show this to you because I think it's really terrible to see how far people have gone into debt simply because this is what the homes cost today. Individuals find themselves using their credit cards for everything. They can't pay back on time. They have to go to these pay advance type stores. It's a debt spiral. They're constantly claiming bankruptcy, and it is really unfortunate what has happened, and nobody is ever addressing the primary issue, and that is central banks have created an entirely unstable monetary system that is doomed to fail. They purposely create inflation over time. They have admitted this time and time again, and we know that, and so it has an effect, and that is the depreciating value of your currency. You know, after a period of time, it's going to be worth less. We know that already, and yet while asset prices are rising, wages have barely done so. We've seen them in real terms actually declining slightly, and that's not a good thing because as new people coming into the market are looking at the prices and thinking, well, I can't afford it. That's not good. The average person or the average household needs to be able to afford the average home. That's the way I see it. There's no other way around it. If we start to see other areas coming up and more people moving into them, guess what? The prices are going to go up. That's just the way it is. I'm going to end the video there. If you found it informative, please give me a thumbs up. When you give me a thumbs up, you're supporting this channel. So I do appreciate that very much. And last but not least, if you want the financial education you were not taught in school, these 2 books have everything that you need. Check them out at the link in the description if you want the audiobook that's available at themoneygps.com.